In the heart of Columbia, South Carolina, amidst the energy of a bustling college town, the life of a young student named Samantha Lee Josephson took a dark and tragic turn. Her story is one that gripped a nation and shed light on the potential dangers that lurk in the most routine aspects of our lives. Samantha, a vivacious and ambitious young woman, was a beacon of light on the University of South Carolina campus. Little did anyone suspect that a routine night out would lead to a series of events that would shatter the lives of those who knew her. Samantha Lee Josephson was born to her parents, Seymour and Marcy Josephson, in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey. As a child, she attended the University of South Carolina, where she majored in political science. Samantha, who was a senior in college at the time of her demise, planned on graduating in 2019 and attending Drexel University School of Law, where she wanted to study to become a lawyer specializing in international law. Samantha earned a full scholarship to Drexel University, as well as a partial scholarship to Rutgers, and aspired to practice international law. Samantha was a member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority, studied abroad in Barcelona, and visited Madrid and Paris during her time in South Carolina. Samantha was amazingly beautiful and had a wonderful smile. Samantha had a boyfriend named Greg, and the couple was very close to each other. They kept in touch with each other every day, constantly texting and calling each other when it was possible. They had plans to start a future together, even when Samantha was going to be attending law school. Greg was going to move in with her and support her. Everything seemed to be going well until Friday, March 29th, 2019, when she never returned to her apartment. Things took a turn for the worse for Samantha on the evening of March 28th, 2019. Samantha planned to go out with her roommate and some friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Her boyfriend Greg was supposed to join them as well, but he was back in his hometown at the time. Still, he told her to go out and have fun without him. Samantha was feeling gloomy after hearing of a family member's ailment. What she just needed was to distract herself a bit, and going out with some friends was the perfect opportunity to raise her spirits. The group met up and went to a few different bars before finally settling at a bar known as the Bird Dog Bar, which was located in an area known as 5 Points, a hotspot for students to hang out at bars. Even though Samantha was having a fun time out with her friends, she continuously texted her boyfriend Greg, beseeching him to make a 2-hour drive to visit her in Columbia because she needed emotional support. The couple had already made plans to see each other the following weekend, so her boyfriend never changed his mind and decided to stay where he was. But still, he kept in constant communication with her. At around 2 a.m., Samantha decided to head back to her apartment by herself, and she called an Uber, a popular rideshare service, using an app on her phone, as that was a common practice among her and her peers. On that occasion, fate would deliver her into the hands of a murderer. While Samantha was waiting for the Uber, she had one last chat on the phone with Greg. At around 2:04 a.m., Samantha told him she was headed home and took an Uber on the way. That was the routine Samantha had done many times before, using an Uber to get to and from the bars because it was way too far for a walk. A few minutes after placing the request with an Uber, a car pulled up to the curb where Samantha and a group of other weary bar customers were waiting for lifts. Security cameras captured her approaching the car, only to realize that the driver was there for someone else. After doing an about-face, she is seen retreating to her spot on the sidewalk. Samantha was wearing an orange shirt and black pants. After some time, a black Chevrolet Impala, driven by a man who was later identified as Nathaniel David Rowland, pulled up into the space in front of her. Samantha said goodbye to Greg, and assuming that was her lift, she opened the door and exchanged a quick word with the person behind the wheel before climbing into the back seat. Once she was inside, the car sped off. Within a matter of moments, the Uber that Samantha ordered arrived at the designated pickup location. After searching in vain for their customer, the driver canceled the request and left. From that point on, nobody other than the 21-year-old political science major student and the man driving the Impala knew that she had gotten into the wrong car. The CCTV footage would later show that the black Chevrolet Impala circled the area numerous times before targeting Samantha. Anybody who has ever spent time in 5 Points was aware that college kids gathered in the streets after the bars closed to wait for their rides, and watching him drive around the area gave rise to the conclusion that he knew exactly what he was doing that night. Amazing boyfriend Greg he was. He tracked Samantha via the Find My Friends app on her phone to make sure that she got home safe that night. While he watched Samantha's movement on the map via the app, he realized that she was traveling in the opposite direction of where her apartment was located. Although at first, he didn't think much of it, as it could be she was going to a friend's house. Greg later texted her to check to see if she was okay. Unfortunately, he never got any feedback. He then tried calling her, but she never answered her phone. Greg never gave up and tried texting her several more times until he noticed that messages he sent her showed up as delivered but not read, meaning Samantha never read any of Greg's text messages. Her phone location later stopped sharing, which made Greg shocked as it had never happened before. Greg later thought that Samantha misplaced her phone in the Uber, but still, he decided to call her friends and her roommate to find out if they heard from her, or if she had made it to her home. Unfortunately, nobody heard from her or saw her. Greg hoped she would turn up in the morning and so tried to get some sleep. The following day in the morning, Samantha was nowhere to be found. Her roommates were concerned about her whereabouts and reported her missing. Her boyfriend Greg also made a 2-hour drive down to Columbia to assist in searching for her. A little over 3 to 4 hours after the missing person report was filed, the dead body of a young woman who was later confirmed to be Samantha Josephson was found by a group of turkey hunters in a woodland area in New Zion, about 65 miles away from 5 Points. In less than 24 hours after she was last seen on the surveillance video getting into a black car, dumbfounded by the gruesome discovery, the hunters straight away called 911, and representatives from the local sheriff's office were quickly dispatched to the scene. After an autopsy was performed, it was very clear that whatever happened to Samantha was a completely violent attack. Her body had more than 120 separate stab wounds, with injuries to her face, head, neck, hands, upper body, legs, and feet. It was also determined that her fingernails were hacked to pieces as she tried to shield a razor-sharp-like tool from making contact with her flesh. It seemed that she was stabbed with a double-bladed knife and then dragged to the woods. The autopsy also revealed the extent of Samantha's blood loss compared to the human body, which normally has at least 4 L of blood. Her body contained only 20 milliliters of blood. Investigators were able to quickly pull that surveillance video footage from the bar that night before, which revealed that Samantha got into the black Chevrolet Impala car. Investigators noticed that the car was circling the block several times, which seemed that whoever was in it was watching and waiting for a potential victim. The investigators found out that Samantha accidentally got into her killer's car, thinking it was her Uber. The Uber that Samantha called was seen arriving a short time later. However, when the driver found she was not there, he canceled the trip and left. It was likely that the car she was in was not the Uber because she was murdered only a short time later. So, investigators believed that the driver probably used childproof locks to trap her inside, because when the childproof lock is on, the doors can only be opened from the outside of a vehicle. So at that point, Samantha would not have been able to get out. The descriptions of the car were quickly revealed to the public in the hopes of finding the perpetrator before he struck again, and fortunately, it didn't take long. After the day when Samantha's body was discovered, the black Chevrolet Impala was spotted by officers on routine patrol at 3 a.m. on March 30th, cruising the very same area Samantha was kidnapped in. When the officers pulled the car over, the driver jumped out of the car and took off running. After a short chase, he was caught a few streets over and arrested. When the police checked his identification, they discovered that the man they had in custody was a 24-year-old resident of New Zion named Nathaniel Rowland. When the patrol officers took a look inside the car, they found a child's car seat in the back surrounded by what seemed to be bloodstains, which promptly made them call for backup after perceiving that they were looking at a presumed crime scene. When homicide detectives took over, they combed the car from top to bottom and found profuse amounts of blood on the passenger seat and in the trunk, as well as a bloody footprint on one of the back rear windows. Samantha's cell phone was also found still lying on the floorboards, which the detectives would later learn that he had attempted to sell to a pawn shop earlier that day, but he didn't like the $125 offer they gave him, therefore leading him to leave it in the car. The detectives also found the child locks activated, confirming the suspicion that that was exactly how Rowland trapped Samantha in his car. Detectives also found a variety of cleaning products in the car, including bleach, window cleaner, and antibacterial wipes. But luckily, he didn't do that great of a cleaning job because there was still a lot of blood in his car. During his interrogation, Rowland continuously denied having any knowledge of the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson, even with piling evidence to the contrary. He maintained that he was innocent of the crimes of which he was being accused. When a physical examination was performed on Rowland following his arrest, it unveiled traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails. In a bewildering turn of events, despite that her genetic markers were present in him, none of his DNA was found on her. While that was certainly unusual, when detectives pieced together the terrifying details of her final minutes on Earth, these findings made perfect sense. From what they could collect, detectives speculated that Samantha was a victim of a blitz attack. The fact that the childproof locks in the car were still engaged at the time of Rowland's arrest led them to conclude that he activated that feature as soon as his victim got in the car, making it impossible for her to open the doors without any means of defending herself. Samantha was left helpless as the man she thought was her Uber driver stabbed her repeatedly with a double-bladed knife. Caught unawares by the ferocious attack, she had to put a lot of effort into trying to fend off the blows, which would account for the multiple stab wounds found on her hands, as well as the condition of her mangled fingernails. Considering the amount of excessive force that was imposed on her, it's understandable that Samantha was not able to scratch her attacker, which would have left his skin cells under her nails. After the dreadful act was done, Rowland drove to a farmer's access road in New Zion, where only a local would have known it existed, and dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. After arriving back home, Rowland spent much of the day posting on social media as if nothing had happened. Since he lived there nearly all of his life, and his residence was only minutes away from where the remains were found, that was two more strong pieces of evidence that pointed fingers to him as the killer. A peek into his background disclosed that Rowland was a devout churchgoer who had attended South Carolina State University in 2017, although there are no records of his having graduated, and it's not clear what he was doing for employment at the time. Rowland had one past felony arrest from October 2018 for obtaining a signature or property under pretenses. There was also a woman who was carjacked by two men, one of them being Rowland, who assaulted her and forced her to drive to an ATM where they took her money. Then they forced her to drive home, where they robbed her of even more of her belongings, including a PlayStation 4. Rowland was never convicted of robbing the woman. However, he did sell some of the woman's stolen belongings, including the PlayStation 4. When detectives obtained a search warrant for his girlfriend's apartment named Maria Howard in New Zion where he lived, they combed the trash bins behind the apartment and found a sock and bandana allegedly belonging to Rowland that were heavily stained with Samantha's blood. The detectives also found a white sheet with blood on it, a roll of duct tape, bleach wipes with blood on them, and a two-bladed knife that seemed to have blood on it. Tests would later confirm that the blood found on the two-bladed knife, as well as blood found on the sheets, blood found in the car, and blood found on bleach wipes, was a match for Samantha Josephson. With the evidence against him mounting swiftly, Rowland was initially charged with possessing a weapon during a violent crime, the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson. The trial would be grueling for the family, with Nathaniel Rowland pleading not guilty, claiming he was innocent, even with the mountain of evidence against him. When the trial began in the summer of 2021, Rowland's defense team argued that their client was an innocent man, based largely on the fact that his DNA had not been found on his alleged victim. On the other hand, prosecutors countered the defendant's claims of innocence with the undeniable amount of evidence that was collected in the case. Amid the proof they put forward was the CCTV footage showing his car picking Samantha up in 5 points and driving away, the quarts of her blood that were found in his car, her bloody footprint on the vehicle's back window, allegations that he tried to use her bank card at an ATM after disposing of her body, cell phone trackers that placed their devices in the same place at the time of the murder, and the fact that he lived near where her remains were discovered. A handwriting expert was also brought in to compare Rowland's handwriting to a list that was written on a piece of paper found in his home. On that list it was written, duct tape, tape her whole body, gloves, all black, flip phone, gasoline, matches. The expert testified that it was most likely that Rowland wrote the list, which sounded as if it was all planned. The prosecutors called 31 witnesses to testify, including someone who saw Rowland cleaning that weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he tried to sell Samantha's cell phone, and his ex-girlfriend, who claimed her daughter had blood on her shoe after being in Rowland's car after the murder. Rowland called no witnesses, and none of his family testified for him. Still, he maintained his innocence and pleaded with the judge. It took the jury only an hour to deliver a guilty verdict, and Nathaniel Rowland was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.